Last night, Ukraine successfully conducted a drone strike on Russia's second-largest oil refinery, the Kirishi facility, using drones with a range of over 1,000 kilometers. Now we'll reveal the devastating impact this strike has had on Russia's entire fuel supply and the sequence of events that unfolded. Let's begin. At approximately 3 a.m., Ukrainian forces launched a long-range strike operation of unprecedented scale. Advanced kamikaze drones with an operational radius exceeding 1,000 kilometers penetrated deep into Russian airspace. Their objective was the Kirishi refinery, a critical industrial hub located in the Leningrad Oblast near St. Petersburg, the home city of President Vladimir Putin. This was not an attack on a random industrial site. It targeted Russia's second most productive and technologically advanced oil refinery, a cornerstone of its domestic energy sector and military logistics. The subsequent fires, visible from miles away, signified more than the loss of a key asset. They represented a direct challenge to the Kremlin's narrative of an invulnerable Russian heartland. For a leadership that has projected its strength by waging war far from its centers of power, the appearance of drones over Moscow and now a strategic refinery burning near St. Petersburg signifies a major strategic setback. The strike exposed a critical vulnerability in Russia's layered air defense network, which includes advanced systems like the S-400 Triumph and Panzer S-1, deployed specifically to protect high-value regions. The successful infiltration by Ukrainian drones revealed a significant gap in Russia's ability to counter this evolving long-range threat, dealing a twofold blow to the Kremlin: the material loss of a vital facility and a serious blow to the prestige of its flagship air defense technologies. To grasp the full strategic weight of this operation, one must understand the specific role of the Kirishi refinery in Russia's economic and military structure. Situated just 150 kilometers from St. Petersburg, the facility is an industrial giant, processing around 15 million tons of crude oil annually. This output represents 5.4% of Russia's total refining volume, accounting for a large share of production in the Central Federal District. In effect, a single facility provides nearly 1/20th of the fuel for a country that spans 11 time zones. However, the refinery's strategic value is defined less by its volume and more by the specialized, high-grade products it creates, products indispensable to a modern military. Production data confirms that Kirishi was a leading supplier of Euro 5 standard diesel fuel, a mandatory requirement for the high-performance engines of modern main battle tanks and armored vehicles like the T-90M, which form the backbone of Russia's ground forces. Furthermore, the refinery produced a significant share of the jet fuel essential for the Russian aerospace forces, powering advanced aircraft such as the Su-34 and Su-35. Most critically for military logistics, Kirishi was one of the few Russian facilities capable of manufacturing specially formulated winter-grade diesel. This fuel is engineered to resist freezing in temperatures as low as -40 degrees Celsius, enabling armored units and supply convoys to operate during the brutal Russian winter. Therefore, the strike on Kirishi was a meticulously calculated military action. The objective was not simply to disrupt the civilian fuel market, but to directly degrade the operational capacity of the Russian military. The attack was designed to immobilize a tank on the front line, ground a fighter jet, or leave a military convoy stranded and frozen in the dead of winter. The facility's ownership, a joint venture between state-controlled giants Rosneft and Gazprom, amplified the strike's significance. This was not an attack on a private enterprise, but a direct strike against assets controlled by the Kremlin and its inner circle, hitting the financial core of the regime. This operation is not an isolated incident, but the latest and most decisive step in Ukraine's sustained strategy of energy strangulation. Independent analysis suggests this campaign has already disabled at least 17% of Russia's total refining capacity, with some estimates placing the figure as high as 38%. In recent months, dozens of refineries and terminals have been systematically targeted, disrupting production and creating a backlog of complex repairs. This steady attrition has weakened the entire Russian energy system, eroding its resilience and spare capacity. The loss of a major producer like Kirishi creates a multiplier effect, threatening to turn a manageable fuel shortage into a systemic collapse for both military and civilian sectors. The attack's location near St. Petersburg also carries immense psychological weight. The city is an economic stronghold for the elites who constitute President Putin's power base. This strike delivered a clear message to them and the wider population. The war is no longer a distant event on television, but a tangible threat at home. The Kremlin's long-standing narrative that the special military operation would not impact the lives of ordinary Russians was directly challenged. The war had effectively arrived in Putin's hometown, turning St. Petersburg into a frontline city. In response, the Kremlin confronts a severe strategic dilemma. The most obvious countermeasure is to reallocate air defense assets to protect critical infrastructure deep inside the country. However, Russia's air defense forces are already overstretched and have suffered significant losses in Ukraine. Previous drone attacks on Moscow already forced the military to pull systems from the front to defend the capital. A similar redeployment will now be required to shield refineries across Russia's vast interior, which will inevitably weaken air defense coverage for frontline troops and create new tactical opportunities for Ukrainian forces. Ukraine is expected to exploit this advantage. The target list will likely expand to include the remaining refineries producing high-grade fuels, major depots near Moscow and St. Petersburg, and the last operational fuel terminals on the Black Sea. The ultimate goal is the total paralysis of Russia's energy infrastructure, which would starve its war machine of fuel and potentially trigger a systemic collapse. As a secondary measure, Russia might try to increase fuel transport via its rail and road networks. However, these logistical chains are themselves vulnerable, presenting new exposed targets for long-range strikes and partisan activity. For the first time, Russia is facing the inherent fragility of its energy distribution system. As winter approaches, managing this crisis will depend not only on air defenses, but also on repair timelines and administrative competence. An energy superpower now faces the challenge of preventing its own major cities from grinding to a halt, where the silent paralysis of fuel queues could become a greater threat to domestic stability than any battlefield engagement. This Ukrainian strategy has entered a precarious new phase, testing not only Russia's industrial capacity, but also its relationships with its closest allies. In crisis meetings within the Kremlin, the most immediate solution appeared to be turning to Minsk. Belarus, Russia's partner in the Union state, operates two large Soviet-era oil refineries. The plan was straightforward. Russia would send its unprocessed crude to Belarus for refining into gasoline and diesel to cover its shortfalls. However, this simple plan encountered a complex geopolitical reality. The urgent communications from Moscow to Minsk were less a directive from a senior partner and more a plea for assistance. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, carefully managing his own political survival, recognized this shift in leverage. The Minsk regime is in its own delicate position. Its refineries are within range of Ukrainian drones, and its economy is strained by the closed border with Poland. Lukashenko has reportedly been engaged in quiet, back-channel diplomacy with the West, seeking sanctions relief. Fully committing Belarusian refineries to solve Russia's fuel crisis would be a high-risk move for Lukashenko. It would make his nation's critical infrastructure a primary Ukrainian target and destroy his diplomatic outreach to the West, likely inviting further sanctions. Consequently, Minsk's response to Moscow is expected to be intentionally ambiguous. While publicly offering support, the Belarusian government will likely cite technical issues, planned maintenance, and domestic needs to avoid a large-scale commitment. Any assistance will probably be symbolic, a temporary fix for a deepening crisis. This situation demonstrates to the Kremlin that even its most loyal allies will prioritize their own interests when faced with significant risk. In conclusion, Ukraine's strategy of targeting Russia's energy infrastructure is a multi-layered and highly effective form of modern warfare. It aims not only to destroy fuel production, but also to deepen Russia's political isolation by exposing its vulnerabilities to its own allies. At this stage of the conflict, the concrete reality of an empty fuel tank has become a more potent strategic weapon than propaganda or even nuclear deterrence. We will continue to provide detailed, fact-based analysis as this new chapter of the war unfolds. To stay updated on these critical developments, subscribe to our channel and share your assessment of this strategy in the comments below. Thank you for watching.